There is nothing more frustrating than feeling like your body is working against you. Digestive troubles, gut pain, skin issues, constant congestion, yet never knowing what's causing these issues. If that sounds familiar, it's time for you to take our new gut health quiz. In just 3 minutes, you will find out if dairy is behind your symptoms like diarrhea, heartburn, constipation, bloating, acne, or the never-ending mucus. And here's the good news. There is a solution. You don't have to keep living with these symptoms. Take the quiz, get answers, and start feeling like yourself again. Take the 3-minute gut health quiz today at switch4good.org/gut-health-quiz. Again, that's switch4good.org/gut-health-quiz and start feeling better today.
Welcome to the Switch for Good podcast. Here we are again with quite a guest. So I have a question for you. What if the limits you think define you aren't real? How far could you go if fear and doubt no longer held sway over your life? What would happen if you stopped operating on autopilot and approached each day with true intention? Well, today's guest is living proof that human potential expands at the edge of discomfort. Joe Gagnon is a CEO, a high-performance coach, ultra-endurance athlete, and author whose mission is as bold as it is heartfelt. And that's what I really love most about Joe. Helping people realize they're capable of far more than they believe. He's taken on 6 Ironman races, conquered 100-mile ultra marathons, and even pulled off 6 marathons on 6 continents in, you got it, just 6 days. His new book, Living Intentionally, How Intentionally Enables Success, how intentionality, I always mispronounce that, enables success, fulfillment, and growth. Joe shares the mindset built on grit, grace, and groundedness that has powered his extraordinary journey. And we are going to spend at least an hour with Joe. So welcome to the show, Joe Gagnon.
Oh, Dotsie, thanks for that introduction. I think Jason was right. You have good introductions. Thanks.
Well, there's so many punchy things about you to read in an introduction and to share. But I think I'm going to start kind of from the beginning. The beginning meaning someone is looking to discover maybe their how, their why, or how they're going to act out on their why, I guess I should say, their purpose, their calling, like why are they here? And you kind of have a way that you discuss in your book how someone might discover their why or their purpose. First of all, do you believe that every single person has one? And if so, let's talk about how you describe it in the book. How can someone awaken and find that why if they're feeling dormant inside?
Thanks for a softball question from the beginning.
Well, this ain't no softball book, buddy. This requires us to go deep.
So first, I think they're all connected to the points some of in the introduction. Like, so human potential really is infinite. We spend most of our lives trying to reveal what we're capable of. The same thing with purpose. I mean, that's inside us. We have to dig a little bit. I think we're trying to unwind 10,000 years of evolution and leave the world of surviving and move to a world of thriving. When we survive, that is what we needed to do when we lived in a world of scarcity. We don't have that anymore. We live in a world of abundance. But along the way, we created a whole bunch of concepts in fear-based thinking that got in the way of us turning the lights on, right? Turning the fire on, turning this inspired perspective that every one of us has inside us. But sadly, if all we do is, no judgment here, if you sit on the couch and watch Netflix, you don't unlock it. You got to do something, right? It's like it needs to be catalyzed. And I would say that if we went back in my history, it wasn't initially for me. I was really good, average person for the first quarter of my life, high school, college, nobody, right? I didn't even have a date till after I got out of college. I had the crummiest job you possibly could. I was broke. My car was stolen, as the story goes. Girlfriend breaks up with me, the first one I ever had. And like everything was just like, okay, so what could I do? I knew how to work. I didn't mind work, so it's 60, 70, 80 hours a week. And after 15 years of that, I made a lot of money and found like basically either I was, as I said in the book, the ladder against the wrong wall, suffocating from success, feeling like this can't be like this, like, is this the next 50 years? Well, would you even live 50 more years? Probably not. Couldn't do a push-up, couldn't run a mile, couldn't write a paragraph. I could just go to meetings, and that was what I knew how to do. And so, the BMW, the big house, the country club didn't solve for anything. It never made me feel good. I had lost my sense of humor. I didn't relate to my family. I was like at best case, like a robot, wearing a trench coat and a suit, following what everyone said you were supposed to do and how you were supposed to feel and how wonderful this life would be. And I'm sure a lot of people listening in are thinking like, yeah, right, exactly. And what? Right. It's sort of a little bit like, yeah, okay, easy to come to that conclusion. Well, it took me then 25 years to figure it out, really, in a way, right? I put myself on a path. I hope it's shorter time for everyone listening. Started with a spreadsheet. I wrote down what I did every day to keep myself accountable, took on challenges year after year, started running a couple extra miles. I left the big corporate job, took a very, very large 90% pay cut, went into the world of entrepreneurship, and then had to go prove myself again. I had no backup. Like there wasn't people doing the work for me. And it was in this shift that I finally started to realize that I might actually have a purpose, because it seemed that the big shift that I made was the shift a lot of people want to make, but are afraid of making it. And so I wanted to then sort of be true to what I had done for myself, and maybe I could be a role model, which is a big statement, of course, bold for sure. But ultimately for me, it became this, I wanted to build myself so I could build others. That's what I was going to do. If you're going to be the foundation of other people, then you better build integrity and strength inside you. You have to run 100 ultra marathons. How otherwise could you coach someone, right? You needed to do 6 startups and raise $175 million. Otherwise, how could you coach an early stage founder? You have to write a book on living intentionally if you want to tell someone how to define their why. And I take all of what I stand up to very seriously, because I think that's the responsibility I have to the rest of the world, right? Not just be a role model that you could read about, but one you could feel, see, touch, and see that like, hey, but along the way, I redefined a lot of things that got in my way. Everything from becoming plant-based, which was never going to happen, stop drinking alcohol, never going to happen, run a marathon, never going to happen, be on a podcast, impossible. Like all the things that happened, they weren't in the cards. Like I said on stage, I went from the Bronx to the boardroom to Badwater, which is this 135-mile race through Death Valley. And, but I wasn't meant to be in those places, right? And so the thing that holds it together ultimately is when you can define that purpose, that why, that becomes your North Star. Now, it's not like you can just say, I know what it is. I wrote questions in the book. I put ideas, pieces of paper that you'd write down on and try to, evolve it so that it became true to what you are. And by the way, it's not just one in your life. I mean, it can evolve as we grow and change where we fit in society, in our families, in our communities. But mine was pretty easy because I lived, with parents who served the world by, being teachers and social workers. And, I always felt I was here to serve, and now I just serve in a different way. So sort of a bit of a long answer to, we have a why inside all of us. We have massive potential inside all of us. The goal for any of us is to unlock that and start on the path. And you will be shocked at what happens when you do.
Is there a question that could start somebody on their journey? It sounds like your journey, right? Never could go plant-based, never stop drinking, never be able to run an ultra marathon. You just kept doing these things. Did they just unfold, or did you ask yourself some kind of ultimate question of trying to find your calling, your purpose, and ask why?
Yeah, I started just by, becoming more curious. Like I just wanted to know. I don't think that I could have defined a purpose in the first part of this 25-year journey, So by the way, for everyone listening, if you can do math, I started on this path when I turned 39. So there was wasn't like I was a kid, who had figured it out or had, trying to come back to their college, Letterman purpose. But my curiosity was my method. So I wanted to find out about stuff, I wanted to see how it worked. I wanted to meet smart people. I wanted to hang out and feel what I thought I could contribute, where I would feel that I was having, purpose. Purpose, like one of the things I try to tell people is like, if you get a good purpose, other people who interact with you in your life, their lives will change because of your purpose. And so it has to have some depth to it, so it's easy to be a person who's serving others with that purpose. But we give some other examples in the book. And so it is a process of asking questions, of testing yourself, of living with an idea. And how does that make us feel? And how does that help us fit into, a much more productive and positive life? And so it is just an exploration for yourself to fit better into the society that we live in. I think the social contract is why humans still are around. We have served each other, throughout humanity. And the more that we do that, the bigger and deeper the purpose is. But in the beginning, it could just be, raising, well-adjusted children who are independent and, have core values, right? I mean, it could be that is your purpose. Like, it really depends. But I think it starts with, you got to be curious enough to want to know what feels good for you. And, the chapter 3 is mastering reflection. This is the process of asking ourselves questions all the time. Am I happy with my performance, how I showed up, what I do? Do I really like this person I've become? Do I love myself? How am I improving? Hold yourself to a standard that you might find as integrity. Embracing discomfort, because actually once you find your purpose, I think you'll find more people who push you away from it and toward it. And I think that, Dotsie, I don't know you deeply, but you were this amazing athlete, and then you found a new purpose, right? Helping people understand better, how to eat and live, the implications of that and how that makes people, so you've committed so much to that. I love the Switch for Good mindset is, how do we improve by the decisions that we make? And so that purpose serves a lot of people, and you too. And so I think that when you were riding around the track, you probably weren't thinking that that was what you were going to become. And so, or what your purpose was going to be. I think it's fine. It evolves, but it's got to have a lot of integrity in it. If we ask ourselves hard questions by ourselves, we always get good answers. Sometimes we just don't want to tell the world.
I'm really curious, Joe, in the process of self-awareness and self-inquiry, asking these questions and getting to a point where, say, we ask, do I like the person I am? Do I like the life that I've created for myself? And if those answers are no, I feel like a lot of humans, myself included, can go into the archetype, sort of the dark night of the soul, right? I've spent all of these decades accumulating wealth, success, status, material objects, the favor of my church, my society, my family, and none of this feels like me. That can be shattering to a person's sense of self. And it can be one of the most frightening things in the world to admit that the life we've created and the person we've chosen to become no longer resonates and doesn't feel like who we are at our core. So I'm curious, in a human being who has the courage to ask these questions and the courage to answer them honestly, how they move through not just the discomfort, but the shattering of one's identity to put the pieces back together and recreate a life that they feel good about, aligned with, and proud of.
Yeah, no, it's a great question, Jason. It's not like a push button model. And even when I thought I was there, I wasn't there. Like we get to the chapter 7, finding meaning through suffering, and took me when I was 57 years old and, falling apart on a mountain to finally realize how many years it took me. What I believe deeply, though, is that you first have to embrace some of these ideas to get through the process, meaning you are not here to live the life everyone's telling you to live, right? Actually, the world wants you to be who you are. We just haven't figured out how to communicate that. So I don't think that what we should be doing is taking the input from the world first. We should build ourselves first. And so I think it's never too late. It doesn't matter if you start when you're 57, you're 29, whatever age it is, because in fact, it might have just taken us that long to break from all of the, I grew up in an Italian family. My mother's mother was from Italy. We ate a certain way and lived a certain way. And I felt that they either had to love me for the things that I was choosing to do or not. That was not going to be my worry. And I think the more integrity I brought to it and how I explained to people why I was doing what I was doing, because when you give up eating meat and you go to, holiday and everyone's putting on your plate and you say, I'm sorry, but I don't have that. And here are my reasons, everyone offers you a drink, they try and tell you how to live. And then you sort of realize that they don't want you to tell them how to live either. So we should just get out of this model of listening and having a bunch of hypocrites try and run the world. And so what I found additionally was that it allowed me, through my hard choices, to shed what I don't think really anyone appreciated. They just allowed it. A guy who works 80 hours a week and shows up barely ever, and your family says, it's okay. They don't really like that. They're only just saying that. They don't mean that. And so the minute you break out of that, then they're like, wow, we're glad you came to this conclusion. I think you get more support when you start standing up for yourself than you realize. I think we're afraid of some kind of ghost that's not really there. But you got to sort of step into it, because we don't ever want it to be too late, meaning on your deathbed. I don't have any regrets. I don't live with any regrets. That doesn't mean every decision I made was perfect. It doesn't mean that, I've been talking to one of my friends who I call the existential philosopher, and keep talking about me falling in love with the young boy that I was and the struggles that he had as the enablers for what my life became, rather than, oh my gosh, he was bullied, made fun of, the smallest kid in the class, couldn't do anything, had nothing going for him. And why would I want to associate with that, rather than he was the method to get me to the place I ended up? And so everything for me has been a reframing. And if you start trying that, it really actually you start realizing that's the framing. It's not even reframing. It is the framing. But you got to practice it all the time. And then you'll start to see that tell everyone, go outside in the rain and get yourself soaked through without an umbrella and come back into your house, and you're going to be fine in about 15 minutes. The things we're so afraid of actually have no impact on us. And it's the same with this kind of change. You just have to jump over to the other side.
It sort of goes down the lane of, you talk a lot about getting comfortable with being uncomfortable in the book. What does discomfort do to, excite people to move past their discomfort? I like standing out in the rain and realize you're just fine wet. You do it every day in the shower. It's going to be okay. I've been thinking about how it seems that most people are seeking comfort, and you mentioned evolution in the beginning, and and then when I look at it, it's like, oh, everybody was just trying to figure out how to get more comfortable as they went along. Whether it was just simple shelter and food, that was staying alive, but also getting more comfortable, feeling full, having shelter. How do you see discomfort typically manifest for most people?
Yeah, I think that we're misinterpreting, this analogy of the signal and the noise. We listen to the noise and never hear the signal, and it's distracting. I actually don't think that our goal as humans is comfort. I actually think it's a state that we can live in, right? And that's different than a goal. It just doesn't trigger anything. It does kill us, by the way, over time, but we don't feel it. The state of thriving is about an abundance mindset. Look, the way the body works, right, is through discomfort, suffering. We've made all of these words negative. They're actually growth words. They are how we grow. Our muscles grow by ripping apart and rebuilding. We build more neurons every day when we struggle to learn. Our autonomic nervous system becomes optimized if we learn breath work. We have red blood cells that increase if we go up at altitude. Like, we have a system that's better than any system ever built. And so it wants to thrive. You just have to put it into that state. So this is one of the things evolution has not resolved. We have two states. We live in a state of survival and a state of thriving. But the survival one is over, like that 10,000 years ago. And we have to just start to realize that. Now, when I said I don't think anyone's goal is comfort, if you ask them what their real goals are, most people would say, look, I want to, maybe make more money, or, learn more, or do more, have an impact, do something in my community. Like, those are all about thriving. However, sometimes when we get into them, we haven't actually convinced or made people understand that when you feel something, it's not negative. It's actually very positive. Like, if you can start to work on that, like the same thing back to the rain, I never even thought about the shower as almost as good an example, right? You go in the shower and you're soaking wet, and you won't go out in the rain without, in your car. The minute you start to realize that, like, I seek out discomfort, like, it is the most privileged and honored place anyone could ever live, because it makes me think, feel stuff that I would never feel. Like, I don't need to win a lottery. I already got the lottery ticket. It was me. I cashed it, and it's giving me compounding interest every year. I'm getting better, stronger, faster, more settled, happier. Like, I don't even know, like, if there's any limit, but I'm certainly going to go try and find out. And then the more positive you are, the more positive you are. Like, it actually doesn't go the other way. So I think first and foremost is, like, it doesn't mean you're going to go run a marathon tomorrow. Like, just start anything, just be curious. Like, I ran the 6 marathons, 6 continents in 6 days. Never imagined that something like that existed, let alone I would do it. When I started that week, I wrote down the lows would be the highs. I wanted to go find this, like, really dark place, impossibly hard, like, oh my God. So I finish, I'm in Los Angeles, and I'm like, I didn't feel like that. It wasn't so hard. Like, what happened? And as I read in the book, maybe it was my framing. It was hard. I slept 14 hours for a whole week, flew 37,000 miles. I ran 157 miles. I sat in coach. It was go, go, go the whole time. There was a lot of strain in the system, but I had accepted it as an experience that I wanted to have. And so it was extraordinarily positive, extraordinarily positive. And the same thing with my Badwater race this year. Everyone thought I was going to go die in the middle of Death Valley. And I'm like,
it's possible.
I was like 115 degrees. I wanted it. I wanted 120. I wanted to feel it and see what was going to happen. Like, it's like this, little kids are so curious, right? They want to know how it works. They want to jump in the mud. Why do they want to jump in the mud? They want to see what happens, feel it, right? And they thrive on that. And then we cut that thing off, and I'm putting it back in. And the more you put it back in, the more it's like planting a garden. It just keeps on flourishing. And it's just like crazy how great it gets.
Do you see what you do as play, Joe? Like, is this play for you?
I'll put it this way, Jason. Every day is a vacation day for me. That's how I think. I wake up and I'm on vacation. Someone said to me the other day, do you go on vacation? I'm like, well, I don't really know how to answer that question. Like, if you mean what people would say is go lay on the beach and do nothing, then probably not. But am I on vacation all the time? Like, I get to do the greatest things ever. I can get up and I can read and I can write and I can go out for a run in the woods and I can hang out with smart people and eat good food and see new things. And that's what vacation is. This is like a mindset. I'm not running away from anything. Like, when you're running away, find out why you're running away. Like, I love everything I do. Like, why wouldn't I? Why would you, like, anyone who says they're bored, like, ask them to say this, like, who do you blame for that? The only person is yourself. How could you possibly be bored in the world we live in? Like, it's impossible. It's only a state that you put yourself in, and you shouldn't. Like, or you should actually think about if and I don't know how many times you rode around a track, Dotsie, but it probably was more than anyone ever wanted to, but I wrote about, the courage to make a commitment to consistency. Most people think consistency is boredom. I think about it as mastery. How can you go to the depths to be able to perform at a level? You have to get to such a micro level. That has to only come through repetition, because so much will go on. I rode my bike 2 years in a row, 15,000 miles. And I said to my wife, I think I know how to ride this. She said, what are you talking about? I'm like, no, like I really feel like I am the bike. It took me almost 100,000 miles. So it's this reframing. So, yeah, am I playing all the time? Sure. Like I'm still, falling down on the trail and skinning my knee. And it's like, I'm sort of laughing, just like, the 4-year-old boy who says to their mom, do you have another Band-Aid? They don't care that they fell. They just want to keep going. Like I couldn't be happier. And yes, every day's a vacation day.
I was just amused inside in listening to, like, what are we vacationing from? And it literally took my husband and I 16 years to recognize that the vacations that we were taking were not vacations at all, because we hated them, because we actually really loved our life and needed to be engaged and learning and doing something interesting. For 16 years, we'd be like, okay, we're going to go on vacation. We would always choose some exotic beach location because both of us like the water. And first day we go out, we're just going to lay here. Right. We're on vacation. We're just going to lay here. Maybe we'll eat some food, but we're just not going to move. And it took us so many of those vacations to realize, like, what keeps us happy is movement. That we were getting any movement on these said vacations because we're just supposed to lay there and relax and think about nothing because our lives and what we do is so crazy. So it made us realize we loved our life. We loved our actual current life and the challenges and the excitement and the failures and the scary parts. And that's what keeps us engaged and excited about living. And just laying there in the sand is not exciting. So now we just do adventures. Like we don't even go on vacations anymore, but it took forever because that's the mindset, right? Of like, we have to escape what we're doing, and that's called vacation. But what if you really love what you're doing? For the most part, right? Like it's not great every day, but learn to be deliberate about what we're choosing to do. And that vacation is not just laying in the sand and staring. So many people, that's what they do, right? They pick a resort and they go.
Maybe if you were a coal miner and you were for 8 hours a day, and
fresh air alone would be exciting for that. Yeah.
So, I mean, maybe, for people who are really tiring their body out, maybe some rest is a good idea. But I think that the through line here is that, we are sort of responsible for ourselves. We can define success any way we want, and that's not, Pollyannish or anything like that. It's actually, if we don't like our circumstance, we have a lot of power to change it. And I know that my mindset has kept me intrigued and interested enough to write a second book. I'm now working on another book. The move away from the ego, right? That the only satisfaction we come from is ultimately trying to impress someone else. Like I could tell you what my best Ironman time was, and you wouldn't even know if that's good or not. Like no one even cares. So you get so wound up in something that doesn't matter, And so I think that ultimately our system works better, when you understand how it works. And there are some elements that I think we can continue to develop. Like if you find yourself really triggered, box breathing, as I'm sure you both have tried, is amazing. Breath work resets the autonomic nervous system. And next thing you know, you're really chill. It's like, oh, wow, that wasn't that hard. That's why I have this rule, you can be really mad for 1 minute, maybe a little bit mad for 60 minutes. And after 24 hours, you can't be, right? Like let's get on with it. Because why would we use up our energy? Like we are a system of energy. How do you want to use it in your life? Do you want to use it like banging against a rock, or do you want to use it, creating and being and living? That's the magic. and I wanted to put a framework together in the book that gave people a sense of that. But, we have definitely used language not to our favor. And the more that we can reframe, the better that we'll all be.
Hey, do you know a kid who's always got a runny nose, stomach aches, or stubborn skin issues that just won't go away? Sometimes the answer is hiding in plain sight, like the milk in their glass or the cheese on their plate. At Switch for Good, we created the Kids program to help families uncover the connection between dairy and common childhood symptoms. It's completely free and packed with expert-backed tools, simple recipes, and printable resources that you can bring straight to your pediatrician. Every child has the right to good health and a brighter future. So whether it's your son or daughter, your grandchild, your niece or nephew, or even the little one that lives next door, this information changes lives. Explore the resources at kidsandmilk.org. Right on the homepage, it says, get your free resources. And I challenge you to take the first step and gather the toolkit we offer, or the education cards, or the waiting room brochures, and march them into a pediatrician office near you. All right, back to the episode.
I'm really curious about the relationship between really actively choosing discomfort and pushing our limits with something. And I'm really curious. I used to have a podcast called This Might Get Uncomfortable. And the whole frame of the podcast was, let's have uncomfortable conversations about doing uncomfortable things and what people discover in that process, and saying yes to the things that we have been conditioned, maybe by family, society, religion, to go like, I need comfort and peace, and everything's got to be okay. And we never lean into the scary places or the challenging places. So in saying yes to that, I am curious, Joe, if you can recall points where you said yes to something, you leaned something really uncomfortable or really scary, and your body or mind was screaming to you, don't do this, you should stop, walk away, and chose to push through anyway. And that's a secondary question to that. How does a person distinguish between a meaningful risk, pushing into the realm of discomfort, or something that is blatantly reckless? Like pushing past into, this is actually really dangerous, and I'm going to do it anyway and don't care.
I'm going to say this lovingly. I think we probably need an hour or two to go through that, because I have so many examples, but I'll give you a couple. When I was at this company called Ernst & Young, I was a partner there. And when I decided to leave, I was making $1 million a year. And I walked away to make $100,000 a year, which, by the way, is not nothing, but it's not easy. I did have a conversation with, Anthea, and said, hey, I'm going to do this. And she said, okay. So I had support at home, which was great. That really was very helpful. And as I resigned, the chairman of the company said to me, I was making the biggest mistake of my life. He said, what did you consider? Why are you doing this? You are on track to be on the management committee. You are literally our top partners. Why we paid you so much money? How could you possibly do this? I said, well, because I need to go prove that I can do the work on my own. I just have to do that. I'm part of a system that's amazing, but I'm just part of a system. And so I needed to go deeper for myself. But yeah, I think there's very few people who want to walk away from that. And someone could say it's reckless because, what was our goal? To save money for our kids to go to college and, and take care of ourselves. We still held to that regardless. We made changes. We didn't go out to dinner. We were very aligned in our family. And so that really helped. I think that often, like if you're on your own, maybe it's different, but we're all somewhat connected, and having a clear understanding as we make some changes with other people. So either they understand you or are supportive, because that will help it work better, being somewhat of a realist, into the discomfort. I don't think, there's a guy named Alex Honnold who climbed up El Capitan without a rope. And he said there's a difference between risk and consequences. And so high risk, low consequences, who cares? walking on the curb that's only 1 inch narrow. If you fall off, it's probably not a big deal. Low consequences, high risk. High consequences, low risk. You go into a startup and lose all your money. High consequences, maybe it was low risk when you started. So understanding, when we use the word risk, it's a probability question. It's not a question of the impact, which is consequences. And so the framing is really matters to how we go at something. We may find ourselves a little too far deep every once in a while, in the startup world that I've been in. I've been part of 2 companies that one filed Chapter 7 and one filed Chapter 11 bankruptcy, had to work through all those issues, people issues, had to make payroll for people out of my own pocket so they could get paid, but I understood everything that I was getting myself into and could feel uncomfortable, yet it connected to the deep purpose that I had. And so it all made sense because that's what I was here to do. If I'm going to serve you, then I have to serve you. It's not unto my convenience. Oh, it's okay. Now I'm able to do that, and so I think that consideration matters. And the more time we spend both talking through ourselves and then with others, the less it turns into the big consequences. Now, I would say there are some things that are just dangerous. We should probably not do too many times jumping off with a squirrel suit. Sooner or later, you'll probably die. There's very, very high probability that's going to happen. And someone says, that's okay in my life. Well, you can't, change that. But most of what we deal with is not life or death. And the setup and the thinking and the communication is what really gets us through, even when it is uncomfortable. I'll just tell you one really quick story. I wanted to demonstrate to people what it meant to be uncomfortable. And so I was on stage doing keynote speech, and the long story short is friends of mine were great musicians. They wrote a rap song. I sang this rap song on stage in front of 1,000 people. I am not a rapper. No one was convinced that I should give up my job and become a rapper. It was good enough. But what I did was, I wanted to show everyone that you could do something like that, right, in a very safe setting, but get the feeling of what that would feel like. And yeah, I mean, my gosh, my blood pressure was up. I was sweating. All these systems were turning on. But it was good because then I understood what would happen. I had simulated in a safe way what it would feel like to get into an area of significant discomfort. One more example. The other night I had all people who work in my company over my house, and one guy there is a great musician, and I wanted him to play the guitar and sing for everyone, but he wasn't going to do it. So what I had to do was I had to play the guitar and sing, not as well as he can. And then it was easy to hand it to him because then he was like, oh yeah, I guess I should do this. So I took on the discomfort to open up the aperture for someone else to show up, and everyone loved it and he loved it. And so that discomfort was great. So I didn't feel like I was doing a great job, but had a purpose behind it.
I have a little bit of a hard right to take because I don't want to miss talking about the concept of surrender. And I'm just going to share my inefficiencies in this category. And I want to know what it means to you, because I was recently asked, I don't know why, to do an interview for a whole book someone's writing on surrender. And even just by the fact that someone's writing a whole book on surrender, I thought, wow, this is really something. I didn't know it was such a big deal that people would want to discuss. And they asked, one of the questions was, is there like a practice or methodology to surrender that one can follow that doesn't cause suffering? So immediately I'm going, I just think life is surrendering. To me, I didn't ever feel like I needed any kind of practice or methodology, and that does not cause suffering. There we go. Red color word, like what there's always going to be suffering, right? That is the path. And so in trying to answer the question, I like, I really appreciate the 1900s philosopher, James Allen, and his words that you are today where your thoughts have brought you, and you will be tomorrow where your thoughts take you. And to me, actually, this means we already live in a state of surrender if we know this. about our thoughts, and only our thoughts can limit our dreams, right? I mean, this whole thing may be fake, right? This just even this conversation could be just living in one of our heads. But only our thoughts can limit us. No one else, nothing else, no other person. So to me, we're already surrendered by literally just being an alive thinking being. Like that's all you're doing on a daily basis, is sort of surrendering to your surroundings and what's happening, and you're responding. And so I'm confused that there's someone writing a book on surrender, first of all, because it just seems to me that is a state that I feel like I perpetually live in. What are your thoughts? How would you even define surrender, let's say? And what are we surrendering to, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think we're trying to shed the ego, right? I'm writing the next book I'm trying to call Beyond the Horizon of Self. And in that, the chapter that I get everyone sort of stuck on is write this chapter. If I am not my accomplishments, what am I? Like write it on a piece of paper and start working. It is so hard to write because you keep coming back to, oh, well, I did this, I did this, I did this. And so to me, surrender is about becoming, and it is about not being on the path, but being the path. And so in that, it isn't that these accomplishments are not milestones. They are milestones. They aren't what we are. And the embodiment of suffering is actually the detachment from all of what we want to measure as our identity. But our identity, back to, is not what we do. It's who we are and who we become. And so that I do think that's, you get into like this, like, do we have the language that can describe well enough what consciousness is, what the human system is interpreting, and the felt experience that we have? But I know what stalls and gets in the way, and why one might want to surrender is that often what we are putting our energy toward is to resolve something. And that's what the surrender is about. So when I went through my journey from what I thought was a kid who needed to prove to the world that he should be here, then I realized that I was trying to prove to myself that I should be here, not the world. I was surrendering to me. And I was using the world as the antagonist to push myself so hard that the world would say, look how tough you are. You're full of grit, and you can do all this, and you can make money, and you're just so great. They aren't judging anything about who I am, just the fact that I turn the system on like a machine. But we're not a machine at all. We're a felt experience. And the first and most important thing is to have self-love. That's the way we show up. So to me, it's surrendering to that. Can you love yourself? And that doesn't mean perfect. That's a bad word also. Because what would that mean? Like, how would you know? Like,
you're trying to control it then.
Yeah.
And that's the opposite of surrender.
And evolving. But it can get to a place where the burden of the world does not drape itself over you, right? Because that isn't the way that we're supposed to live, right? We don't carry that burden all the time, whether it's family or work or society. Like, we have to first embrace ourselves, this, whether I think it's transcendence or you like self-actualization, whatever the phraseology, I think that surrender is an embodiment of your own felt experience in your consciousness so that you can exist at your highest potential with no noise in the way. And all these other parts are noisy, I didn't impress you enough. I didn't do that enough. I didn't have enough. There's I don't know why we stay there, And so that, to me, that surrender happened, when I burst into tears finishing up Tahoe, and wasn't because my ankle was blown up. It was because I just had my own sort of opening up to oh, wow, you're okay, kid, and ever since then, I've never had more peace in my heart. I just have this feeling that I wish I could describe. I've been trying to figure out the analogy, and it's a little bit if you played video games and most people end up on level 2 in their life. Maybe there's an infinite level, but what if I'm on level 7? Could I even tell you what that's like? Or could I at least convince you that the journey is worth it, that the exploration is worth it? Because you would want to get to higher levels in a video game, right? No one wants to stay on level 2. We keep recycling the same points. That's all we're going to do. We got to open it up more. So that could be, like, I do agree with you, like back to the language, you'd have to go way deeper into the word surrender to have it make sense. And so to me, it would be about the pathway to self-love. And, then, yeah, I like looking in the mirror, say, yeah, I think that Joe guy is pretty good. It's not, like everyone objects to this idea, which is yourself first, family second, work third. Like if you don't prioritize yourself, you can't serve the world.
What comes up for me is this phrase that I was talking to a good friend of mine, Andrew, who's a mindset coach. This framework of being a self-led human, being self-led. And what comes up for me and what you're saying, Joe, is really challenging ourselves to think about all of the infinite possibilities of expansion and growth. You mentioned the word abundance a lot already in this podcast. And, it reminds me of the Joseph Campbell quote. And I'm going to butcher the quote, but, the treasure you seek is in the cave you fear to enter. So this idea of our mythologies and archetypes that we grew up with, I was obsessed with mythology, Greek mythology, Egyptian mythology. The lore and the folklore was always about, facing the monster in the cave, right? Realizing that the monster's me. The monster is my limiting beliefs. The monster is my limiting belief systems, or the things that have been imprinted on me that I need to shed to slay the proverbial monster within myself. All of that is coming to my next question. I'm going to make another transition. You seem like a dude who is pretty comfortable facing fear. So could you name the scariest moment that you have deliberately chosen to walk into? What was it, and what did it teach you, and who did you become as a result of that?
Yeah, there are a lot, Jason. The one that was the most explicit, sometimes the racing stuff is like sports analogies, right? They're so easy for us to understand. I was in a race, Tucson, Arizona, springtime, monsoon comes in. I got lost in the woods and I had to be rescued by the National Guard. Had they not come, probably we wouldn't be on the podcast, because it was in the low 40s, pouring rain, 50-mile-an-hour winds, and I had severe hypothermia. And I'd been writing a blog for years. Every day I continue to do it. It's now going on 4,700 days in a row of writing this blog. And when they took me in the Jeep back to safety, and I'm literally convulsing, I'm sitting there thinking like, oh my God, how am I going to write about this and tell everyone I'm a failure? Like, how could I possibly do this? I'm going to say I didn't finish this race. Tough guy. Everyone thought I was a tough guy. Like, and I'm not a tough guy anymore. I had to be rescued. Like, what the heck is that? And I was spinning and spinning. And I finally got to safety and warmed up. And later that day, I'm like, well, I guess, if you have any integrity, you got to write about what happened, because that's what happened. So I wrote about it. And I got messages back from people like, oh my God, you finally have us not worrying. For once, you didn't finish a race. We're like so happy you're alive. It was funny. The reaction was exactly the opposite of what I thought it would be. I thought it would be like, oh my God, you're a failure. Instead, it was like, oh, we're so happy you're alive. And I was like, oh, I wonder if I should be listening to which voice there. So yeah, I was so afraid, literally, that I would go back to that kid who was made fun of and be then made fun of again. And now I don't really care. I literally don't look, I want your input. If it's sincere and helpful and genuine, help me improve as a person, all of that. But most of the input we get has nothing to do with that. It's power over, it's intimidation, it's insecurity. It's about manipulation and hypocrisy. It isn't about helping. So if it's in the helping category, we should all listen. No, the rest of it is just noise. We should just completely ignore it. Now I know how to ignore that. So I don't fall for everyone else's trap, but I had to work my way through it more than just that time. Sometimes we try and hide from who we are, but maybe the world needs to know who we are. And then it does become easier to lead with the self. It's interesting as I listen to these questions, you guys are so insightful. Like if you went back to your listeners, so one of the problems with some people who have accomplished a lot is like everyone says, I can't be that person. I could never do that. And like I'm the I could never do that person also. And then I'm listening to these questions like I literally can't even believe I'm answering these questions. Like but then I'm like, well, but you lived a different experience set than most people, and I lived my life out there, never been safe as the world would define it, but it's always been real and very felt. And so I like the lived and earned experience. And so, yeah, if you skin your knee, it's fine. But, I've exercised 9,000 days over the past 20 years, over 20,000 hours. You think I would have learned something about that, I've written for 4,700 days in a row, and I rode my bike 125,000 miles, and run 57,000 miles. I've read hundreds of books, and just like I don't know, I just do with my time, the 168 hours in the week, I use them, right? That's like, and when you do that, you don't need anything else. Like this massive capacity is inside you. And then if you're somewhat reflective, try and write, answer the questions, challenge yourself, hang out with people who make you uncomfortable because they ask you hard questions. Then it's like, wow, like this is amazing. Like, oh, so you can all end up in this place. We all can.
All these things that you do every day over the course of many days and months and years combined, it makes me think about growth. And you talk a lot about growth in the book. And I wanted to ask you how you make sure you are always growing. It sounds like it's almost just innate. It's natural for you, right? Like that's a lot of growth that you just listed. And you're just wired that way, it sounds to me.
Yeah, but it came from like breaking free from a trench coat and a blue suit. Like I was like everyone. And then I didn't want to be like everyone. I wanted to be me. And so I think we all have curiosity in us. Sometimes I have this, like, I know I say it like this way. I desperately want to know. Oh my gosh, that's like the greatest thing. So this past fall, December, actually, I did 2,000 pull-ups in 11 hours and 40 minutes. And I wanted to know how many I could do and what it would feel like and how much it would hurt. And what was this journey going to be like? It was like, would I get more hungry? Like, would time be slow or fast? It was just like, I don't need anything else. Like, you can just create it. And it's like back to, like a 4-year-old boy or 3 of them together. Just watch them for a minute and see what they do. They like create this storm of activity and feeling. And so, yeah, I think but it's self-reinforcing. The more you do it, the more curious you get, the more you want to know, the more that because back to our system is made to thrive. Truth is, Dotsie, we are in a state of decline after 35 years old. Evolution would say we're really not that useful anymore. Okay, so but if you want to change the slope of that curve, then go do something. Otherwise, that slope is pretty darn low. Who wants that? I don't want that slope. I'm fine if I keep going and just one day I'm, a spirit. But between now and then, I think it's just, and we're not in a rush. Let's say someone on the podcast is 35. Said, look, play piano for the next 25 years. Do you think you'll become a good pianist? Do you think? I think so. Just like, we don't have to rush. Doesn't mean we know how life goes. We don't know that. But just lean into it. And don't create traps for ourselves. If you are focused on improvement, then simplification. So I like to tell people that I pretty much eat peanut butter and jelly every day for lunch. Every day. And every day I love it. Like, oh my God, I can eat peanut butter and jelly. This is amazing. There's no boredom. It's exciting, but it's simplification. I don't have to think. I get my protein, my fat. I like the taste. It's great. It's high calorie. I need it because of all my stupid running. Like, I do the same thing every day. And everyone's like, I can't do that. I ate that yesterday. I'm like, why would we create that trap? Like, what is that trap? Like, I don't understand. Like, then you're stuck. If you want to be stuck, but you don't have to be. It's up to us. And
Right.
and I found all of this like, wow. Like, so there's nothing, I mean, there's some things that we don't know as humans, right? But really, actually, to have a phenomenal life, we know it all. We know how to eat, right? We know how to work. We know how to improve. We know how to treat each other. We know how to write, read, think, like it's all there. And then what do? We ignore all of what we know would be successful. And the only thing we can get ourselves hooked on is someone who somehow ended up with $1 billion, who's miserable, by the way, because some of the people I coach are billionaires and they are the most unhappy people. And I know everyone says to me, oh, you don't understand. I'm like, no, I am telling you, they are miserable. They keep trying to buy their way out of something. Meanwhile, I'm like, this nut job that everyone's like, how could you be so excited and happy? I'm like, because I'm in charge. Like, why wouldn't I be?
Right.
Like, I am the boss of me, Jason. That's the point, like the self. Like, there is no boss. It's me.
Yeah.
So, like, I don't know. It's so simple. Maybe I'm like just out of touch.
No, I love your approach, Joe, and I want to say this. It's interesting for me to feel your energy of curiosity, of I wonder how this would feel. I wonder if curiosity and wonder seem to me to be an impression of things that are driving you forward. And that's very different from a lot of conversations either I've had or studies that I keep reading. There was a post that came up on my social media feed yesterday talking about the psychological makeup of motivation and why certain high achievers are really motivated by their trauma, right? My dad didn't love me, so I'm going to have $100 million company to say, see, Dad, I was worth something. You see what I did? See, Dad? See? But until they heal that trauma, they're just, the thirst for more and the thirst for enough can never be quenched. You don't sound like you're motivated by that, and it's really refreshing. However, I am curious because you mentioned about bullying. You mentioned about some of the things you went through as a kid. We have to acknowledge if we're human on this earth, we're going to be traumatized. We're going to go through some shit. We're going to have our teeth kicked in over and over. How has the traumatic or painful things you've experienced, particularly in childhood, influenced how you are motivated, and how does it play into your life now?
Yeah, I would say, I'm privileged. My dad's alive. He's 96 on Monday. And he was a social worker in the New York City schools, and he and I still have these great conversations. And I always say to him, Dad, look, I'm not working on the big T trauma. I work on little T. Okay. Big T, I have no right to talk about that. This is someone who might have gone to Afghanistan and seen some horrible things. Some people, but the truth is the big T is a very small percentage of trauma. The rest, the little T, means we can resolve it ourselves or with our family. Just a little bit of care. And, my favorite line in the book is, and she finally realized she could not write a better past for herself. So much of our trauma is hooked up to what was. And then and what I evolved to was it enabled me to become, not what it got in the way. Would it have been nicer to be loved more? Or if I had a girlfriend in high school, it doesn't matter. Like, no, it doesn't matter. That's the big shift that I made, was that because if you keep trying to rewrite it, we don't live there. And I'm not going to be 16. So what it did do for me was it created this world of lack of dependence and high independence. And so here's like my example. If you're not invited to the party, and that happened all the time, how would you fix that problem? Have a party, invite everyone else. No more victim, only a thriver, right? So reframe it, and it doesn't bother you. Then and someone said to me once, why do you keep inviting people who don't invite you? I'm like, you're missing the point. Like, what does that have to do with anything? I'm having a party. I want them to come. There's no dependency. It's not if then. And so then it frees me. It frees me over and over again. And then, when you're trying to prove to your dad that he should have loved you more, well, he had the problem. Like, there's nothing I can do about that. And so why would it? I guess we could say conceptually it would have been better. Okay. But it wasn't. And so we can't live there. And so then, for me, I actually did have loving parents. That's the only thing I could probably say was my biggest asset, supportive, could move back in the basement, which I did, when I had no money. And they're like, oh, you'll be fine. You're going to be fine. I'm like, oh, okay, I will be. Like, how bad could it be? Work at McDonald's, live in a studio apartment. I'll make it work. Because this is my life. And when you do that, what happens is none of that ever happens. It really doesn't. Because you've actually you've embodied the bad, and then the worst case it is expected, but it's never bad. And so, yeah, I somehow, maybe all the time on my own, one of my friends says, I meditate when I run. I'm pretty good at thinking of nothing. Like I really got good at thinking of nothing. And in that, processes work. And I just thought, if you want to create the life you want, who would you put to the task, you or someone else? And I'll bet on me any day. I think everyone should bet on themselves. Sadly, too many people take themselves out of the game. Maybe that makes it easier for us to succeed. But, it's I think then the other thing, Jason, is becomes very self-reinforcing. Like I call myself a dope often. Oh, you dope? How could you have done that? And it's okay. It's good. It's a reminder, that my standards are hopefully high and everyone recognizes that. And, sometimes you don't realize the impact you have in a positive way on other people. In my company meeting the other day, we have core values, and the most important value to me is respect. That is the most important of any value. You can't even love someone if you don't respect them. It means we are equal on this planet. We have a right, just like everyone else, to share in the resources that the earth provides for us, to be supportive and not judgmental. It matters none of any of the attributes anyone has. We are all together sharing this experience. And so that's our number one core value. And we have core value awards that when you get that one, that matters. Like, because it's so funny that the most important is the simplest, sort of. And so we gave that out. I nominated the person, and they wrote me a note afterwards that you don't even know how big of a difference that made for me. Like that, person has had a challenging life on many, many levels. And they're like, oh, wow, I needed that. I needed to know that I reflected that value. And so it's those are simple, right? We can all do that. We can all celebrate each other. And, it's like I have two daughters who are adults now. And I learned a long time ago that if you don't like the way it feels, don't do that to someone else. Okay, so if someone nagged you, then don't nag anyone else, there's a lot of simple lessons in life that make it work a lot better when we embrace sort of who we are first and then how we show up. And I think, the best part is I don't even know what's next. I'm trying to figure out this behind the horizon of self idea, because the more that you do that, the easier it gets.
You remind me of Charlie Ingle. Do you guys know each other? The Running Man?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I know him, but I don't know him. I know of him, but I don't know him personally.
Yeah, it's a good, it just in the realms of always being curious. It's a big thing of his, and then not being stuck, right? He was an ultra runner, was supposed to run the Badwater one year. He had to go to prison for a year. So he ran the Badwater 135 miles in his prison cell. And that is just, to me, just like the shining light of not being stuck. Like no one is going to stick me. Most people, I'm pretty sure when they go to prison, they're like, well, that's going to be a waste of a year, whatever the length. But your philosophies and how you live, and he's a wonderful human, and so are you. But we've had him on the podcast. But it's you guys you guys should meet.
Yes,
I think you'd love running together.
Yeah, I think that, it's funny because sometimes if you can't meet someone in person, you could probably watch their video on YouTube and get to meet them that way.
Yeah.
Everything is always a possibility. There's never a dead end, and I like doing that. If you really want to learn something, it's pretty amazing what you can learn from others so you can get better at it. And and then things happen in your favor,
Yeah.
Really does.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that too. My Chihuahua agrees with what we're saying right now.
I love that. That's real life, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I got to tell you that having this podcast for so long, I've had 3 other Chihuahuas in my life and they've all passed, but they're all on past podcast episodes because they like to talk while we're talking. So I get to go back and hear my Yodi and my Lola if I want, or it's like kind of cool.
We just don't understand it completely.
Yeah.
Well, they're working on that as a totally a right angle transition. There's a nonprofit called the Earth Species Project, and they are using high quality microphones and AI technology to decode animal language.
Cool.
They've already begun with whales and cetaceans, dolphins.
Yeah.
But the idea is we take the shapes of language, because all language has a shape to it, we're finding.
Right.
And then
like a sound shape, right? It makes a okay.
Correct.
Sound wave, yeah.
And so through AI, they're decoding animal language. And the idea is that someday we would theoretically be able to understand what our domestic animals are saying as well, which could have huge ramifications. That's another podcast entirely, Joe.
Yeah, why did you shave me? I need my fur. Leave me alone.
Right. Don't cut my ears. Weird.
I've never liked this food. Why do you keep giving it to me?
I don't know if I want to know. Oh God.
Yeah, right. Exactly. The other thing, just in the enablement category, I always feel obligated. Like, what does someone do? Right? Sometimes they feel like they don't know what to do. So my favorite thing to do is to take one piece of paper and write Sunday through Saturday on it, and put the hours of the day. And then for 1 week, write down what you did every hour of every day. And at the end of the week, categorize it and add it up and see how you spent your 168 hours. And ask yourself, do you like how you spent your time? And I've rarely found anyone who says, oh my God, that was totally optimized. It was the best way to use my 168 hours. Because it's a lot of time, and that's your currency. And so it's a great place to start on self-reflection. And then you can say, I could actually find 4 hours. What could I do with 4 hours? Like, that's amazing, right? If you had 4 hours a week, not, spoken for, and then you change the entire dynamic. Then you don't trade your hours for something else that you really don't want to do or shouldn't, or waste and not come back to. So it's a good, really simple tool for everyone to use every once in a while. Even after you've been on this path, still good to, commit how that 168 hours plays out in your life.
I want to do that. That sounds a little scary too. Like, there's definitely some time wasting I do in there, I think.
Well, but I think that but it comes back to it's like, it's not about being critical of ourselves. It's an understanding. Like, if you then said it's okay, then that's what you are. That's okay. No one's judging. It's, you just might not have had the awareness. What was it I wrote in the book that, like, there was 180 billion hours of Netflix watched last year, around the world. And I imagine what would happen if we used 90 billion of it more productively for humanity. What would happen? And so I don't judge anyone watching Netflix either. I just want to always be aware, be in the game, being the person. That's it. Then it's up to us. It's the free will. We are the choices that we make. That's what we are.
This has been quite magical. It's flown by. I feel like we just got started, and we could certainly keep going. But where can people get this?
Oh, it's on Amazon, as you might well expect. We all love and maybe not love Amazon, but what they do with the real-time printing of books is amazing, So that, and then it's around the world because of that. You can get it in different geographies. So on Amazon, Joe Gagnon, Living Intentionally. If you read some of the reviews, Dotsie wrote an endorsement in the front of the book. I was so blessed to get so many amazing endorsements, and we put them in front of the book because I want people to feel the kind of positive energy that any of us can create. That other people are willing to say that, and then the reviews have been really great. But there are some worksheets. So I'll tell you one of the quick thing that's really the most exciting news for me lately. There's a not-for-profit called the 5 Ventures in the U.S. I write about in the book, and it's entrepreneurship for people who are incarcerated and post-incarceration. And so I'm a mentor and part of the program. I've done some prison visits to help do some mentoring. And so they're going to actually put the book into their learning management system, and all of the entrepreneurs incarcerated and post-incarceration get to use the book and a lot of the questions in there, so they'll have another resource for them. That's fun, because then I'm getting to share with people who probably don't get access to too many resources. But yeah, it's out there, and we'll love people to read it. I put my email address in the book. Someone said to me, "Am I a nut job?" I'm like, "Yeah, I am. But if you read it and you want to write to me, I want to hear from you." Like that, and I'm a surprise and delight kind of guy. Someone wrote to me and said, "I'm reading your book on Kindle. I might want to buy the paperback, but I'm not sure about the font size." I'm like, "Give me your address. I'll send you a copy." They're like, "You really would do that?" I'm like, "Why not? Of course." Look, this is what we can do. Like, come on, let's do it. So yes, if you can't afford the book, send me an email. I'll send you a copy.
That's very cool. And I just learned this weekend at Barnes and Noble, there is a large print section of Barnes and Noble. It's like, but the books are like 4 times as thick, right? Because That's so great. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Dotsie. Thanks, Jason. It's a pleasure being with you. I love the questions. You guys pushed me to another level, and I look forward to continuing our dialogue and be helpful to you and to all of your listeners anytime I can be.
Thank you, Joe.